It's very deep in ZANU PF. If you think you can buy, try buying all the voters of Zimbabwe to power. Then to go now to the shoko. Now, if you try to use my electoral colleges, who are representative of party organs at that level at 10 particular time, we can always waive the rule book against you. Alternatively, we just deepen the electorate of ZANU PF. Kana wangu wafunga tunotenga Central Committee toku kandira ma DC papu. Tuona tunotenderera Zimbabwe yese uchivatenga here. Kana zvanetsa tobva kandira ma districts futi papu. Tuona tunotenderera Zimbabwe yese uchivatenga here. Kana zvanetsa tokandira ma branches. Utenderere Zimbabwe neshoko rako remari uchivatenga kuti vakuvhotere. Kana zvakunetsa tokuendesa kusero uchitenga futi. What I'm saying is that this is a party which has got a mass organization aspect. And when we go to vote, you don't go to vote by electoral colleges. You vote by the population of Zimbabwe. So ZANU PF cannot afford to blink about appeal to popularity. Because if you do so, you get false leaders who will lose elections in 2028. Because the elections are done by mass universal suffrage. So for sheer survival as a party, we cannot afford to have electoral colleges of the party become substitute for the mass popular vote, which is the basis upon which we rule this country. What am I saying? Is don't attempt to use money or cars or what. Saka ukatenga veMuharare province, woenda futi unotenga vekuBulawayo, woenda futi unotenga vekuMutare, vese uchivapa motikari. Thank you in your usual generosity, the fourth estate. You have come to the home of the permanent Zimbabwe revolution, which is ZANU PF headquarters. Our first secretary and president of the republic, Comrade President E.D. Mnangagwa, that's where he presides, strategizes, and executes the policies which have made Zimbabwe the most bullish economy in Southern Africa today, and also the most promising African economies in a number of ways. It all happens here, and some of you do come and cover him when we have our policy meetings, our strategic meetings. This is where President Mnangagwa conceptualizes and then gives instructions to his government, which he also presides as the chairman of the cabinet and president of the Republic of Zimbabwe. We are happy to announce that he has just come back from two important visits. In fact, three important visits. One of them was to Equatorial New Guinea, where the African Union, that important institution of African unity, but also of resurgent Africa, held its regional meetings to assess what Africa has been doing in the economic sphere at a time when there is all global attention refocusing on Africa. It's no longer viewed as the continent of hopelessness. There used to be a disease called Afro-pessimism, which has persisted since independence. It has been replaced by Africa optimism. And this meeting about regional cooperation is looking at how Africa can use its resource dividend, its youth dividend, its emerging market to recharge itself on the global stage as an economic powerhouse. I always remind people that Africa is the home of humanity. And Africa is also the home of civilization, the Egyptian civilization. So the law of uneven development sometimes favors Africa, sometimes it favors other regions. But this time, the stars are aligned. They are pointing at Africa. So the president was in Equatorial New Guinea with his colleagues from regional organizations, all of the 5 or 6 regional organizations of Africa, to compare notes and to chart a way forward so that Africa can assume its role again in the global economic affairs. From there, he went to Osaka, which is the expo. Japan has just announced the winners of the elections today. So it was quite a busy time for the Japanese government. You know, in election time, you are accountable to your people, so your ministerial duties or presidential duties are not important. So the Japanese were busy with their election. But the president saw it important to go to the expo. Why? Because he's a futuristic president. He has been around, he's now in his 80s. He always wants to appreciate the global trends. And there is no occasion like an expo to capture the global trends at any particular time. When cities decide to host expos, they showcase what they are doing, they showcase what their host country is doing, but all the other countries of the world go to that expo to show themselves at their best. Now, if you are a visionary leader who is forward-looking, who cares about the future of your country and the youth, there's nothing which replaces seeing, because seeing is believing. What is seen and touched is more important than what is briefed upon in cabinet by a minister or by an expert. So in Osaka, the president took advantage of the occasion to appreciate what is going on in all the various aspects of socio-economic progress by humanity, because that's what Osaka encapsulates at this particular time. So it was a good learning experience for the president in light of the many things which he's doing to make sure that Zimbabwe takes its rightful place in the various fields of socio-economic endeavor, which will shape the future destiny of this enterprising, hard-working, organized African population, which is the Zimbabwe people. From Japan, he proceeded to Algeria. Algeria is dear to us as a country. When the African Union was formed, a lot of its leaders were politicians because they had not fought a war to be independent in West Africa, and except perhaps a little bit in East Africa where there was some fight. Independence was got on a platter because Western countries were afraid of an organized African population and they surrendered power early. But Algeria was very near to France and it was a French colony. And there was a sizable French colonial population in Algeria. From 1956 to 1962, Algeria fought one of the bitterest African anti-colonial wars against the French, and they won. So by the time the African Union is formed in 1963, Algeria had joined Ethiopia as one of those Africans which had a militant army which is owed to the people fighting for their independence. This is the revitalization of the virility of Africa as a military force. Algeria was at the forefront, sorry, not Nigeria, Algeria. And as a result, they decided to impart their anti-colonial military experience to Southern Africa, where apartheid and racist and colonial regimes in Rhodesia, Southwest Africa and South Africa and Mozambique, they were entrenched. They were not ready to cede power. So the only other country which had a modern template, which had fought a modern war, was Algeria. And a lot of the early African nationalists from Southern Africa who became revolutionaries were trained in Algeria, including Nelson Mandela. You know, he was a trained comrade. But here in Zimbabwe, we have some of our luminaries who were trained in Algeria. Our president was trained in Egypt because of Abdel Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser. But Algeria, he had the practical experience of fighting a modern guerrilla war against the French army and defeating a modern European colonial army. So it made Africa feel proud. That magic which Samora Machel would exercise in Southern Africa, it is victory in 1974. The first such template was Algeria. So it was befitting that our president would make a head of state visit, a state visit to this country to pay homage to its contribution to the story of African liberation. And remember, it is a Muslim Arabic country. Of all countries, Muslim and Arabic in North Africa, the one which has consistently identified with Southern Africa from the beginning of the Africa Union is Algeria. So it is an important symbolic visit in terms of the restoration of the military virility of Africa, because without an army, your own army, you risk the return of slavery, you risk the return of partition, you risk the return of colonialism, you risk the return of neocolonialism. Because if you can't defend yourself, you are vulnerable in this world. I always repeat, ask the Aborigines, ask the Native Americans. We don't want that story here in Africa ever again. And Algeria stands at the forefront of that pride in the restoration of African military virility, of which Zimbabwe is a shining template in Southern Africa. And I shall dwell on it later when we talk about Manicaland. So these were the three important state visits. It was beautiful to see the president with all those those Zimbabwean students in Algeria who are learning all the various fields. It's a rich country, it has oil, and it's also, you know, it has taken big advances. It has a steel industry, so a lot of technical agreements, because steel is important. Algeria is one of the serious producers of steel on the African continent, and we are now one. So this visit was good for bilateral relations, for emotional relations, and for the increasingly bullish story of Africa, which I referred to earlier on. We are in the season of our conference, the party conference. The dates are 13 to 18, is it? Yes, October. And so we are about hardly 2 months away from the party conference. This is an important event on the calendar of the party. You know, the last party conference in Bulawayo, the resolutions which it passed, including the one on 2030, and the president being the candidate of the party for 2030. I know the president has said that he's a constitutionalist. He is not prepared to go beyond 2028, when his constitutional mandate ends. But it's his volition. But by the same token, it's a democratic party. If you see a president who is performing so well, sometimes you say, if it is not broke, don't fix it. So people who are excited about the president's performance are saying, Comrade President, the Constitution may say one thing, but the Constitution is a product of the people. We would like you to continue, and if it means that we look at our Constitution to so facilitate, we would want to do it. It is their democratic dispensation and volition to think like that. And there's absolutely nothing wrong for them to think like that in a democratic party. So for people to continue to make an issue about it, to say why should people think somebody whom they like should continue in power, no, it's misplaced. You know, you can also have your opinion why he shouldn't be there. You keep your opinion, but you are not a member of ZANU PF. But if you are a member of ZANU PF, you can profile your views at the conference, and if they carry the day, then you win. But it's a democratic organization. By the same token, if you have got your views and if you are not in the party, you are not part of the club. So don't try to dictate things from outside of the party. Join the party, and you can come to the party conference with your views as a member, and try to have your view, try to canvass for your view with the membership. I hope if you have joined that, you won't be a member to be part of the debate. You also will have the decency to accept the outcome of the debate and the resolutions, should your views not carry the day. You understand? So I hope this addresses this persistent clamor about why should 2030 be this and why should not. It's a democratic party. People, they have their views, they give them in their resolutions, and they express them. The consummation of those ideas is another issue, because it is all the subject of the debate, but it is all the subject of the person who may be the object of those resolutions. So it takes two, those who are advocating and those whom the advocacy is targeted at, who is the president. Those are the people who matter in this debate. Anybody else is by and large irrelevant. The problem is that for a long time, people did not want our president to be the president of the republic. For a long time, they didn't want him to emerge as the top leader of the party. For a long time, after I became the president and leader of the party, they wanted to remove him. That's why sanctions were kept intact. That's why there's been this persistent debate about succession, notwithstanding that the man is too busy running a modern economy so successfully. That's where the attention should be. But those who are detractors, those who did not wish him to ascend to the apex of power, they cannot get out of their mindset that he should be out of power. So they keep churning this issue about why does he have to be in power for another day when he shouldn't be. So they want to foist that debate on our party. But our party is too busy. It is too busy building a modern Zimbabwe to be bothered. And they are too busy appreciating the leadership which is offering to be stymied by those who are saying that our president should not have been there, should not be there, and will not be there. They are not interested in that. So this is what will be decided at the party conference, the leadership issues of the party in terms of the future of the party, because we are only 2 years away now from the big party congress where the issues of leadership are going to be resolved. But that is not the biggest thing which the party people will be interested in. The biggest thing will be economic issues and the improving general welfare of the Zimbabwe people, the performance of the economy. Because this creates the bond upon which ZANU PF continues to rule. It promised the Zimbabwe people freedom, it gave them. It promised the people, it promised the people in the army to defend themselves, it gave them. It promised the people of Zimbabwe independence, it gave them. It promised the people of Zimbabwe national consolidation and the preservation of that independence, it gave them. It promised people a modern economy, it is giving them. It promised people their own national currency, it has given them. It has promised people more regional integration to connect with our neighbors. It is giving them. This is the record upon which ZANU PF stands upon, not the capping by detractors from left, right, and center. No, 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 no. That's what the people of Zimbabwe will be discussing. The resolutions of the previous party conference and the tick-by-tick box of each resolution and how the party, how the president, and how the government is faring in those tick boxes. That's what we will be focusing on in the party conference in Manicaland. We want to say it's an honor to Manicaland. We have done the party conference in Gweru because of the cradle of the militants of ZANU PF. That's where we are on Liberators slogan came with the late national hero, Comrade Abaning Stole, leading the party. And that was what became ZANLA Forces, the main wing of the Patriotic Front, and the one which was based in Mozambique during the liberation struggle. It was born in Gweru. Well, we have had the party conference circulating much central because of the cradle of the liberation struggle. Then we have Midlands. It came because of the party history, the militant side of the party in 1964. Then it went to Bulawayo because of also the cradle of the organization, modern organization of nationalism, Father Zimbabwe. You will remember him, he was a leader of the trade union movement in Bulawayo because it was an industrial city which took iron ore from Zisco and made it into heavy steel goods which were the backbone of the then NRZ, Rhodesia Railways, the backbone of the railways of Congo, into Katanga, the railway of Zambia, the railway of Botswana. They all ran from Bulawayo because of the steel industry. So the trade union movement was very strong because workers are the easiest people to organize. This is the birthplace of modern nationalism, embracing it from the ANC. And that's why Comrade Joshua Nkomo, Father Zimbabwe, starts off in Bulawayo with the Zimbabwe Railway Workers Union, then the Rhodesia Railway Workers Union. So we honored Bulawayo by the conference last year. Now we go to the province which took the liberation struggle to another level in terms of scale and scope. And here credentials, plaudits go heads down to Manicaland. Suddenly, with the victory of Frelimo in 1974, we had a long border from the Zambezi to the Limpopo. And the beauty of that border was that it was mountainous. So suddenly the guerrillas didn't have to cross a river to go and fight in Zimbabwe. They actually took cover with the mountains to come and fight into Zimbabwe. But also the people who wanted to go and fight, they went to Manicaland using the border to cross into Mozambique. So in 1975, 76, thousands upon thousands of young people left through Manicaland to go to war. They would come back trained soon afterwards, because we had those who had been taught army, military science and arts from the northeast. They were now based in Mozambique, and the training was very quick to retain people to come and fight in Zimbabwe. We now had our own training corps of Zimbabwean army, no longer needing to go to Algeria, no longer needing to go to China. So Manicaland became the conduit for every guerrilla coming back to fight into Zimbabwe. And all the people who wanted to go to war also went through Manicaland. That's why I'm talking of scope and scale, which is what we are recognizing. That's why the president says, this time we descend upon Mutare. That's where the conference will be, which takes cognizance of the evolution of the Zimbabwe struggle and the different roles which were discharged by the people of Zimbabwe as they fought a modern scientific people's war. Yes, taita zve religion, yes, taita zve masvikiro zvaivemo, because we respect people's cultures. But at the end of the day, the war was run in a scientific manner, the people's war. That's why we read Marxism and Leninism from Chairman Mao to guide us to be where we are. That's why we became socialists, because we had to organize the people to become rulers of themselves by raising an army, fighting against a strong enemy. We were organizing a united people against it. That's asymmetrical warfare. Manicaland is the home of the scope and scale of the modern Zimbabwe in terms of its contribution. And it is heroes of Manicaland whom will be honoring: Chitepo, Ndangana, the Mataures, Reverend Abaning Sitole, the Madekrozas, all those people from Manicaland who were at the forefront of the original birth of the Zimbabwe army. That's where we will be this time, in Manicaland. So let's have a date with you. 13 and 18, we are in Manicaland for the People's Conference. We also want to say Manicaland is important for the re-identification for the realignment of the Zimbabwe economy. Everybody knows about the great Zimbabwe civilization. It was built on abundance of agricultural surplus. People who could not be bothered farming just went into the granite copies, they cut wood, they burn it, they poured water, they peeled off granite, they shaped that granite with steel tools, because we were very advanced in steels, and they built the great edifices which are the great Zimbabwe civilization, starting with Mapungubwe in South Africa, starting with then coming to Great Zimbabwe, later to Danamombe, and then to Kopi, but another 200 to 300 small Great Zimbabwes. dead fish of that type, stretching even to southern Angola, between the Zambezi and the Limpopo. This was the great Zimbabwe civilization for 800 years, which has given South Africa the UNESCO heritage sites, which gives Zimbabwe continuity as a country, the population of Zimbabwe, which other African countries may not have, in terms of existing structures which show that you have a long story. Others built on grass, they built on wood, and they built on mud. Come rain, come fire, both are destroyed. In Zimbabwe, you go there, it is there. But beyond surpluses, beyond steelworking, beyond gold, which was our currency, there was also the trade with the Indian Ocean. So we ran ports, the great Zimbabwe civilization, in the Indian Ocean, all the way to southern Tanzania, to a town called Kilwa, which was, which is on the Rovuma River. This is the great Zimbabwe civilization. For those who may go to Vilankulos today, there is a town near Vilankulos where you find a great Zimbabwe, but there are no granite rocks in the area. The river Save used to go through that part. So the trade would go to Great Zimbabwe, then they would bring stones from Great Zimbabwe and build a Great Zimbabwe on the coast of Mozambique, even without granite. This is the reach and extent of Zimbabwe as a trading empire, as a trading. So the Indian Ocean is important to us, and you can see, you can also notice that King Mutasa was so strong with the Manica people that the Portuguese could not come through across to Zimbabwe when they were conquering the country. They'd go through the Zambezi Valley. This was the strength of Zimbabwe because we ran the ports in Mozambique. Even when Rhodesia came, of course, the first thing which they did was to divide Zimbabwe from Mozambique. The border was done so that we don't have ports. The other part became Portuguese Empire, and we lost our ports and we became weak. Then Rhodesia came. They opened the ports of Beira to another level. And a lot of trade between Zimbabwe, Rhodesia then, and Mozambique, East Africa, was through Beira. But come UDI, Beira closes as a port because of sanctions. Then a little bit later, after 65, we have 76. Samora Machel, to support the war, closes the border with Mozambique. And the last train, I remember it, I was at Chimoyo at Junda camp. The last train from Chimoyo, from Beira to Harare, was stopped because he wanted to support the war. So Mozambique's collapse as an exit port for Zimbabwe, as the coastal hub, exit to the Indian Ocean, meant that Manicaland began to suffer. And that suffering extended even after post-independence. You know, Renamo was deployed into Mozambique by the South Africans to go and fight to make sure that Renamo becomes another government, a rebel government in Mozambique. And Manicaland, second time, comes to the rescue. We had to fight against Renamo because they didn't want to have a neighbor in Mozambique in another Manica. Remember, the process is Manicaland in Zimbabwe and Manica in Mozambique. So the people of Manicaland fought, so it became again the supporters of a new war to defend the integrity of Mozambique as one country. We had epic battles at Casabanana, Gorongosa, Mutare, by the Zimbabwean army, fighting against South Africa's apartheid Renamo. Takaita gate nayo South Africa in Mozambique. And we came out on top as a modern army, the Zimbabwe army. This was the most powerful army in Africa, the apartheid army. We may not have fought between us on the Limpopo River, but where there was a side battle, a dress rehearsal in Mozambique, they saw that Zimbabwe was up to the task in that dress rehearsal. And South Africa backed down from supporting Renamo. Our army was victorious in the fight against Renamo, and we won the peace which eventually prevailed when our current president went to Rome to negotiate the peace accords between Frelimo and Renamo to thwart South Africa's attempts of trying to use Mozambique as a backdoor entry to suffocate the economy of Zimbabwe, to force us to go to Durban 2,000 kilometers away instead of Beira. Why am I saying this? We are now going to Manicaland for the party conference at a time when there is a new vibrance about Manicaland as the gateway of Zimbabwe's trade to the Indian Ocean and to the trade. I was happy a few days ago to read that Manicaland, the port of Machipanda on the border post, has become more active than even Bight Bridge. You understand? Because the whole region now is going to the coast through a much shorter distance than going to Durban in South Africa. And you can imagine the cost that it gives us, the cost advantage it gives us to our exporters. Instead of going 2,000 kilometers away to Durban and then by container and come back, bring goods by container, by road truck, which makes it $4,000 by the time it gets to Bulawayo or Harare, let alone probably 7,000 by it goes to Lubumbashi. We now go to Beira. So there is a revival of the ports of Beira and Mozambique, and a lot of investment is going into the port of Beira. We also have to put a lot of investment, maybe create another one-stop border post much quicker than we are doing between Beira and Harare, with Mutare as a one-stop border post. That's why this new mood about going to Manicaland is not just only historical, but it also about the future of commerce in Southern Africa. This is the beauty which we will be celebrating, that our sacrifices from the 60s and 70s and 80s, when we fought for freedom using our army, they are now bearing fruit with a closer economic union between Zimbabwe and Mozambique. But with it, it is also drawing our neighbor South Africa. The first time South Africa is not looking southwards as a regional power. It is now looking northwards as a continental African economic power. This is good, because South Africa carries the most advanced economy on the continent. It has the most advanced financial system on the continent. Now, all of that was never looking northwards. We were suffering under sanctions where the Santon never cared about investing in Zimbabwe. We had to go to China to get investment. Santon was looking the other way when it should be the natural launchpad of economic investment in Zimbabwe. That is changing. Santon is now looking northwards, and Zimbabwe is going to become the beneficiary. This is the culmination of the efforts of that generation of sacrifice, that there is this now integration in our economies. And this is what we will be celebrating by the party conference in Manicaland. The restoration of the Eastern Gateway is the access to the global markets of the world. It's easier to trade with the world through Indian Ocean, because most of the people in the world are across the Indian Ocean. From Beira to Mumbai, it's about 7 days by boat, 8 days. And you are now with 1.3 billion Indians ready to buy from Zimbabwe. And these are new economies which are emerging, which have a new middle class, which are now becoming consumers again of African goods, like they used to do during the Monotapa days. You are not far away from China, another 1.3 billion, 2 billion people. You are not far from Indonesia, another 400 million people. It's Pakistan, it's South Korea, 100 million people, more than that. These are the populations which we are now having easy access to. So there is a new vibrance which is coming by looking eastwards. I was ambassador of the Look East policy. When I went to China in 2002, people did not believe, because they thought the Atlantic Ocean and Europe mattered. I couldn't ambassador Xinjiang. Remember, they are bringing Chinese backwardness and Asian backwardness into Zimbabwe. We belong to the West. But now, everybody now sees what ZANU PF has done by reorienting towards our historical roots as a trading nation, which is to look across the Indian Ocean. So this conference in Mutare is a celebration of so many things about us as an aspiring, forward-looking African economy. This is why this conference is so important, because of the creation of hope among the youth, among the Zimbabwean population, partly in regional integration, but reorienting us towards even trade with other African countries. It's easier along the East Coast. Yeah, you know, we can trade with Egypt, we can trade with everyone, because you know, you try to go through the Atlantic Ocean, it's okay. You know, because we're also developing Walvis Bay. But it takes longer. But the population of Europe and the economies of Europe are not as what they used to be. The future is what? Is Asia. So here's a chance for Africa. And our president, you can see by even him going to Japan, we are looking east even further than the traditional friends. So, celebrating the victory against South Africa, back to Renamo, we are celebrating the contribution of Manicaland to the liberation struggle during Chimrenga II. We are celebrating the history of modern commerce, of national commerce by Zimbabwe during our long 800 centuries of the Muntapa Rosy kingdoms, the great Zimbabwe civilization. What better place to do it than in the east, in Manicaland, the heroic people of Manicaland. This is why we are going there. I want to go to address an issue, okay? I think because of the economic aspect, there is a new thing which may excite the region. You know that we now have the most modern steel industry on the African continent. It's growing. The prospects are very big. We are now dovetailing our industry with South Africa because it is the most advanced steel fabrication industry on the continent. All the cars which you see from South Africa, that's South Africa producing those. But the raw steel from Zimbabwe is cheaper and of higher quality since the advent of Manise. So every week, more than 500 trucks leave Zimbabwe to South Africa, exporting steel. And the South African steel fabricators love it. So it gives them a competitive advantage on the global markets. They export their cars to Europe, they export their cars to America. It gives them a quality advantage, but it also gives them a proximity value, proximity in the value chain from Zimbabwe. These are exciting things about African integration. And there is nothing like steel to integrate economies, because anything which goes beyond one floor upwards, you can't use wood anymore, you can't use cement, you have to have steel to support it, like this building, like anything else, like the flyover at Trabablas. So steel is important. And the template shows it that when France and Germany united in 1951 to form the German and France Steel and Coal Union in 1951, they stopped fighting 3 times they'd fought. In 1951, they said, no more wars. Paris and Bonn and Berlin, we are managing our steel together. It was Bonn at that time, now Berlin. That is the European Union today. So the integration, dovetailing of Zimbabwe steel with South Africa creates huge opportunities which nobody ever thought of about Africa, about an economic union between Zimbabwe and South Africa. But the exciting aspect is that our neighbor Mozambique again has become big in energy. God just loves this region. You know, as I speak, there is a big delegation at Cabora Bassa, which are now looking at having a second power plant at Cabora Bassa. They are also looking at building another dam just down from Cabora Bassa at Pandankua, 60 kilometers from Cabora Bassa. And there is another possibility of another dam at Barragem in Mozambique. And remember, the Zambezi River is more powerful when it gets into Mozambique. All the tributaries from Zambia, from Malawi, from Zimbabwe, from Congo, from Angola, the river is more powerful in Mozambique. So hydroelectricity power in abundance is the prospect, because Mozambique is got this big river, one of the 4 important rivers of Africa. But there's also the Cabo Delgado gas fields, where even America now is putting 4.7 billion. What it means that we can have a steel, coal, and energy union between Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and South Africa. And I can assure you, if that comes about, with the way all the energy resources are next to the natural resources of making steel, within 1,500 kilometers of each other, Zimbabwe and South Africa, and we have all the iron ore. Even Tanzania has got nickel, which is another alloy beyond chrome, which Zimbabwe and South Africa has. Now South Africa number 1, Zimbabwe number 3 globally. So the things which make steel are within the perimeter proximity, but also the energy to make sure that we produce steel can be produced so cheaply in Southern Africa. What does it mean for the young generation of Zimbabweans under the futuristic leadership of ZANU PF and President? You can look at the prospect of one day producing the cheapest steel in the whole world. We will decide the price of steel globally in this region. This is the forward-looking manner we ZANU PF do. That's why we were so forward-looking to say we can fight and win and create an army. A whole generation of diasporans went to learn martial arts and war in the 60s and 70s. The chance for the new generation is these economic prospects on the global stage, which are advented by the fact that God put all the things which make the most important matter of human progress still within a perimeter of Southern Africa. And then he gave the region the energy, either hydroelectricity power or natural gas, which is greener, but even traditional coal, the coking coal in Hwange is the best in the region. So these are the things which excite ZANU PF as a party. These are the things which excite our president as a futuristic leader, not petty quarrels about succession and this and that and that. This is what makes our president pry the world to see expos, to understand the trends on the global stage so that we can anticipate where we are going. I also want to take this advantage to rebase the issue of business people in Zimbabwe and who is the main business people in Zimbabwe. Because if you read social media and you read the history, you are always being taken to the former colonial companies which have existed as if they are the core of the Zimbabwe economy. The story which ZANU PF has written in recreating a modern economy which is growing is overlooked. Now we even have a new template which gives the impression that who have monetized the wealth which ZANU PF has created for themselves are business people. No. The main number one business people, and I want to give you the perspective from which I am coming from. I'm from business school. You don't learn MBA without a case study, and you don't finish MBA without role models in business. Now, if you want the case study of a business organization in Zimbabwe which is most successful, you don't have to look none other than this building, Chibuku House. We are the most successful business entity in Zimbabwe. Don't look at CZI, don't look at Chamber of Commerce, all this. These only come at a secondary stage. The primary position, the position of primacy is held by ZANU PF. Why? We said we are going to educate Zimbabwe's people so they are the most capable on the African continent. We are number one. You understand? Even though we are last born number 3 in Africa, we are number 1 in education. Who did that? ZANU PF. We asked the people, we have a little money at independence. We can't pay for building of schools. We will use the money to pay teachers, but each village must build a school. If you build a school, we reward you with your teacher. That's why all of you are educated. Because each village was building a school so that they would be rewarded with a teacher from Harare. There was competition by the villages. There were more schools being built than the teachers from Harare on the little budget. The government lost the battle, went to Cuba to catch up with teacher training. Sent 6,000 to 8,000 Zimbabwean students, teachers to train in Cuba, teacher training, in our former military camps in Cuba. They came back as teachers. That's only when we closed the gap between Zimbabwe people building schools for free and the government supplying teachers. Mozoona tonzi takafunda kupfuura Africa yese ndokwazvakabva. Mazoona, these are our people. We gave them education. We gave them back the land, because without the land you cannot have the means to become prosperous. Then we said, we give you the land, we give you the markets. Takanotsvaga some of the best companies in the whole world to do tobacco in Zimbabwe. China tobacco is #1 in the world, because we are only a small country with very productive capacity, because our agricultural capacity is the best in the world after probably Ukraine. So we can't produce for 16 million people, we're going to produce for 6 billion people in the world. So we identified the leaders in those markets globally, Kuya Zimbabwe. That's why you can have 350, 60 million, and still going up to auction floor, Borerino. 360 million kilograms of tobacco grown by Zimbabweans. Even you know how much each farmer is carrying home on the average? $10,000 US. And tobacco is traded in US dollars. You tell me which African economy can deliver such prosperity to its people by just one crop alone. Tobacco, 360 million kgs traded over $1 billion US. And 82% of that going to small to medium farmers. This is what we have done as a party in one crop alone. Gold. Look at what it has done. More than 1 million young people digging gold. The biggest foreign exchange earner for Zimbabwe, and 70% of that gold. Never dig gold. Still, we are now going to become a major player in the region. Again, ZANU PF has done. These are the fundamentals of the economy. Those are the sinews, the fundamental, the foundation upon which this economy is done. Who has done that? President E.D. Mnangagwa. Saka kana ura ubvunzwa uda kunzira teacher shasha business uri business school muZimbabwe muno. Tanga kunyora kuti Mnangagwa ndiwo #1. Zvikanzi which is the top business organization in Zimbabwe. Tanga kunyora kuti ZANU PF ndiye #1. Ndo inozvigona. If I wanted to even to mention the creation of the small businessman, the Zanopf, I mean, if he was somebody else, he could probably created an SP for gold production, because he is the one who was Minister of Mines in 2016 when the SMEs were legalized. He was the Minister of Mines. He created the SME sector as a minister. That's where they are creaming off what ZANU PF has done. I was ambassador to China. Chinamasa akauya achitaura nezve convicts. He was Minister of Justice. I said the Chinese Minister of Justice is in charge of what? Of security, but he also oversees the border control against smuggling of tobacco. Because the biggest business around China for many years was countries having factories around China to smuggle cigarettes into China. So their national security was focused on protecting the source of the taxes for the Chinese government. And the #1 source of taxation was tobacco, cigarettes. So Chinamasa, I said, chikanda zvekutaura nezve-convicts, taura nezve-forge. Our tobacco production had gone down to 20 million kgs. We talked to, Chinamasa told the Communist Party of China, I was ambassador, and the Communist Party of China gave instruction to the biggest tobacco company in the world, China Tobacco, to go and help Zimbabwean farmers. They were being denied finance by the banks because the banks were colonial, and we said we can't refinance white title deeds which already existed on that land. We created a direct relation between the merchant and the farmer, and contract tobacco came about. He didn't go there and say, I'm now going to start a special purpose vehicle. He gave it to the party, gave it to the people of Zimbabwe. I was involved, I know. Even gold, I was involved. So I'm talking from things which I was involved. We had challenges with our currency. An individual achiprinda mari pa switch yake. Anchataura staraki. I convinced the president to stop that company from having money on the switch. Mukadai makazara muchishuka panapa panza pakazara vana vari kuti tiri money changer. No creation of wealth. just screaming off what ZANU PF has created, my US dollars. That company was stopped from doing that. The switch was taken to the Reserve Bank, Zim switch. Headquarters, that's Newlands, Itra. That's ZANU PF. And President, I want to create a private company out of it. SPV, couldn't create a wealth. We closed one company to create in a private currency, hence old mutual implied rate of exchange. We closed it and domesticated that currency at the Reserve Bank, restored the primacy of the Reserve Bank as the only creator of money into this country. That's why we have the ZIG today, because the Reserve Bank is in charge. I mean, ZANU PF, President, I want to my special people's vehicle to marry individually. So I don't know where this thing about, very corrupt, President, where is it coming? We created wealth for the generality of the population of Zimbabwe. We are the top business entity in this country, ZANU PF, and I can say it proudly. You see, the challenge with Africa is being given heroes who are not yours. When we were growing up, vanhu vachitengesa ana chombe ana savimbi ana zakama ndo vaida kunzi these are the African heroes who were being given heroes by the West. The West Africans who were traitors were the ones who were being told they should be our heroes, not Samora Machel, not Patrice Lumumba, no, not Amilcar Cabral, not Oliver Tambo, not Tongogara. These were not heroes. My heroes, don't accept to have heroes being foisted upon you by your enemy. And that's why ZANU PF today, it pays that the heroes of the modern business economy in Zimbabwe comes from this building. We created the economy, not anybody else. Some people can cream it off now and monetize. But they should not create wrong impression to young people who are at university. And teachers who are teaching business in MBAs, they should know the true heroes of this economy. And I've just mentioned them. ZANU PF, number one. And our president, top there. He is the created the modern business environment. Hey, time body name QFP to Rugamuno. Sakapera, Damnanga Guaywa. Kugona. He cannot go on everything one day because the economies take time to grow. But he has created the sinews, the foundation of a modern economy. So economic and business heroes are from ZANU PF, not from anybody else. And those who may now be profiting from it, they should have the humility to come and pay homage, not to come and strut themselves around ZANU PF as if they are the end all and be all of business. No. My job as information officer of the party is to guard the intellectual property of ZANU PF. No basarangu. If I don't say this, no created when my heroes are Syria on one. They create themselves and face them as heroes of the modern business community in Zimbabwe. I'll tell you this is in confidence in that I have to say. The company I any currency I muno. Reserve Bank. When the land reform was done, the current president and the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the former Minister of Finance were dispatched to South Africa by President Mugabe to see Mandela kuti tapiwa ultimatum nema British kumaputo na Robin Cook kunzi maita zveland reform your economy is going to sink. So naturally we went to South Africa for solidarity, and Mandela was very nice. He says, yes, we are in the trenches together on this one. I'll send you to my Minister of Finance to see how we can work together around the British sanctions. They went to that Minister of Finance of South Africa. You know what he told our current president? So yes, mabakuna politician, in Indiri banker, I won't mention his name. Kana mchida kuti ndikubatsire ichenda yamunozosira minda kune varungu. Then South Africa will help you. That was a South African Minister of Finance. Saka vakadzoka vanhu vedu vachitunhaira vasina chavakabata vabva kuna Minister of Finance here. Even when I then was drafted to become ambassador to China, I was in a meeting with the Chinese with our delegation yabva kuZimbabwe na president vedu. He had the temerity to summon our Minister of Finance kuti buda meeting nema China. Mazoenderei ku China ndoda mapfura nemuno mungadaenda kupa mari yemarands muri kuite chi ku China. That was the Minister of Finance of South Africa trying to direct the affairs of Zimbabwe. Come 2025, Zimbabwe is the ZIG. Zimbabwe has got a Minister of Finance who has done well as part of the economic dream team of the country. Now that same guy is the chairman of this big company under Taura currency in Zimbabwe. He goes to State House. Oh, the president took time to remember him again. Who are you, by the way? Oh, you used to be in the ANC. Who are you? Oh. Because the shoe was in the other leg. You understand? The shoe was what? In the other leg. This is the robustness of an economy which we have created. That a big company which used to own the currency of this country goes begging to State House. Could vabvumidzwe kuita trade their stock yaita track our currency. Varamba kuenda ku Victoria Falls. Vachiti vada kudzokera ku ZSE. So president looks the other way and he had to try to remember who this guy was again. You understand? Kunakidza kwemasimba economy yakreatwa nava Mnangagwa kuti even IMF yakauya takavapa lecture muZANU PF building muno. This is the supreme institution of global economic and financial management. Ayanga musingamboyi kuZANU PF vakauya rwendo rwuno. Imboda daiwo nekugona kuri kuita party yebusiness inonzi ZANU PF. Ndozvandoda kungotaurawo nhasi. We are the part of business. We have created the top business people in this country in the leadership of ZANU PF, which has delivered a modern business economic environment. Do you know what is happening with high net worth individuals in the world today? They now know that Zimbabwe is a hard currency country. We operate on the strongest currency in the world, the US dollar. Here, we are like the 52nd state of the United States, but our US dollars are not given by the American government or from the federal in New York. They are earned by Zimbabwe people. Atina zvekupiwa mbasera zvechikwereti deyedu. So high net worth individuals now know that the current account of Zimbabwe is in the black. If you put your US dollars in Zimbabwe today, you want to take them out tomorrow. Anigaripo. So a lot of the high net worth, you know what I call high net worth individuals? The people with excess money globally. Mabillionaire vai. Vakutoziva kuti ukaendesa mbari yako kuZimbabwe inopfuura tomorrow unoiwana nekumwe. That's why we are always having an extra amount US dollars than the economy can need. That's why we can pay out. We may not be there yet because tichine zvikwereti zvakabva kumashure zviyezvi. But on current account, not on the historical account, we are in the black. Kugona kumanage kwa economy kakuri kuitwa neteam ya president. We say you can't quarrel with success. The president has delivered an economic success and it speaks for itself. That's why the IMF comes to pay homage to Chibuku House. Vakauya pano. So the business people in this country come from this building. They are the best. We are the best. Vamwe vese vada kutaura ngavauya vambotanga vambosaruta kwatiri pano paZANU PF vasati vada kuzvirova zvidundundu kuti havabviri. Because it is very important that the party guards its intellectual property. It is very important that young people who are in school identify the success of them economically and success and business-wise with the party, with this government, not with individuals who may be just taking advantage. Vanhu ngavaite pride in a party yavo, not anybody else. This is what I'm trying to do. And as an information officer, that's my job. To guard the intellectual property of ZANU PF and its successes and communicate it to the general public so that the people identify hope and better aspirations for a future life with the revolution of Zimbabwe, which is run from this building. That's my job as an information officer. And I want to challenge anybody who may have a variant view kuti ngavauye neni padebate pane nyaya iyoyi tinopedzerana. Because ZANU PF ndio shasha, ndio businessmen epamusoro. And all I'm talking about is things which I've been involved in. I'm not talking about hearsay because I am financed from New York. I'm a businessman in telecommunications. I know what foreign direct investment can do. I was in China. I know what can be done with steel in Africa because I've been involved in those projects. Handisi kutaura zvinhu zvekunhonga murodhi ba. Ndiri kutaura zvinobva pano pachibukawo zvinoitwa naMnangagwa, Sub-President of the Republic of Zimbabwe. And I want to challenge anybody who may have a variant view to a debate. Because my champion is what? ZANU PF and the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa, as a businessman, the role model and the case studies of business success in Zimbabwe. I want to thank you very much.